In between missions, the pilot's life on the airbase of Tinian is relatively relaxed. The men can enjoy a taste of good old American baseball or participate in other sports. However, there's always the reminder that there are still Japanese in the jungle who will attack the airbase at any opportunity. To hit Japan more effectively, there's a change in tactic for the March 9th mission. From now on, B-29s will fly between 5,000 and 8,000 feet, carrying a new kind of bomb.
Well, General LeMay came up with a brand new notion that we would bomb individually at night and that we would deliver incendiary loads. I myself was directed to bomb at 7,800 feet on that first Tokyo mission. Others were bombing at lesser altitudes than that. On that first mission, there were 300 B-29s, which took off from Guam and Tinian and Saipan. We took off on the 9th, we bombed on the 10th. We wiped out 17 square miles of Tokyo in what was one of the worst fires in the history of man. We saw pieces of houses like windows and doors actually going by the airplane at around 8,000 feet. I've never been in worse turbulence in an aircraft anywhere that was stronger than that night, March 10th, over Tokyo. We had at least one airplane, which I'm sure was lost because of the pilot's effort to maintain his altitude in the face of the terrible turbulence. And the wings did pull off. The aircraft was seen in 3 major parts as it went down over the target that night.
In one night, 15 square miles are reduced to ashes. 84,000 people lose their lives, and 1 million are made homeless. March 1945. The B-29 air war against Japan continues now unrestricted, with raids on Nagoya, Osaka, Kobe, Yokohama, and other cities.
The Japanese reacted to the bombings by depopulating their major cities. After the May raid on Tokyo, the Japanese air forces, both Navy and Army, withdrew their fighters from air defense and began to hoard them in anticipation of the coming battle of the Japanese mainland. In other words, the military authorities wrote off the cities.
To accommodate the heavy load of bombs on the new low-altitude runs, some of the plane's weight must go. B-29 pilots cope with a trade-off, which makes each mission more dangerous.
Well, General LeMay had ordered that all but the tail gunner remain home, and of course, we thought that that was going to do us in too, that surely without any guns on the airplane except in the tail and no gunners, that we would probably just be in terrible trouble. It was going to be a huge suicidal mission. General LeMay had figured out that the automatic weapons, such as machine guns, would not get to our height, and that the fuses for the anti-aircraft couldn't be cut that low. And as a result, we didn't get touched by any kind of fire. General LeMay's objective was have the bomb bays as full of bombs as you could get. And on those 5 missions in 10 days that we flew, each bomb bay was as full as you could get it. What he cut down on was the fuel load. Now that was also an alarming situation because some of the fellows were just certain they would not have enough fuel to get back home again. But without having to climb at the high altitude, and being able to cruise at a much lower altitude, we didn't require nearly so much fuel. And he had that figured out well, too.
On May 23rd, a final knockout blow is directed against Tokyo. Meanwhile, American leaders make plans to bring the war to an end. Operation Olympic, scheduled for the fall, will be the first invasion force to enter Japan.
the incendiary bomb was the M69. This was dropped from the bomb bay in such a way that at about 1,000 feet or so, bands holding the bomb together would release, and then it would turn into what we called 38 bomblets that were filled with napalm, and whatever they hit, they ignited. It was on the bombing run. We would probably anticipate some flak, and the thing would just burst. The shell would turn into real sharp fragments that were very damaging. And the problem for the aircrew was that the aircraft might get hit in a vital spot. You could not help but sympathize with the people on the ground. There were thoughts about the folks on the ground and what they had to be suffering.
With more than 1/3 of the city laid waste, Tokyo is taken off the list of incendiary targets. American aircraft can now penetrate Japanese defenses with impunity.
Following the attacks, the government issued emergency food rations to the survivors. They also organized special refugee trains to get more people out of the city. The magnitude of the American B-29 raids was overwhelming. Almost 100,000 people perished in a single night. Most of them were burned beyond recognition.
Japan's air losses have reached catastrophic proportions. Nearly 2,000 planes a month. The civilian population, underfed, fatigued, and discouraged, are at the end of their endurance. In a last valiant effort, hundreds of Japanese planes are specially fitted for kamikaze attacks. If B-29s cannot be shot down, they'll be brought down by mid-air rammings.
The kamikaze were mostly young, 19, 20 years old. They were chosen because of their aptitude for flying. Most of them tended to be bright young men. Their attitudes towards their missions varied tremendously. Some believed that by destroying a B-29, by ramming it, or by destroying an American warship off Okinawa, their death was meaningful because it delayed the American invasion of Japan for a single day. Others simply regarded the whole exercise as futile, as hopeless, and as meaningless. Yet they obeyed their orders. Very few refused to fly, even the ones who thought that this was the height of absurdity. They went to their deaths because they had been trained to do this, because their educational system had promoted the notion that to die for the emperor was the greatest duty of any loyal subject.
As Japanese kamikazes sacrifice their lives over their homeland, events have begun which will determine the outcome of the war. On the morning of August 6, 1945, a B-29 takes off. Its mission is to prevent an invasion of Japan. In a matter of seconds, over 70,000 lives are snuffed out. Another 70,000 are gravely injured. The atom bomb explosion has destroyed nearly 5 square miles of Hiroshima. Before Japan has time to recover, an atom bomb is dropped on Nagasaki on August 9th. On August 14th, the Japanese government decides to accept the Allied terms of unconditional surrender. Atomic warfare has made further resistance futile. American B-29 pilots on Tinian are happy the war is over, but are not fully aware of what has happened to Japan. The realization of nuclear warfare will raise controversy about American tactics, but most servicemen agree that the atomic bombs saved thousands of lives on both sides by preventing an invasion of Japan. Officially, the war with Japan comes to an end at 10:30 a.m. September 2nd, 1945. Japanese diplomats assemble on the USS Missouri to sign the peace treaty on September 4th. General Douglas MacArthur presides over the signing.
Let us pray that peace be now restored to the world, that God will preserve it always. These proceedings are closed.
After the peace treaty is signed, American forces occupy all of Japan.
The Japanese never understood that the United States was deadly serious about unconditional surrender and would enforce it no matter what the cost.
For the millions of Japanese who now have to live with defeat, life will not be easy. But there is a proverb that says, after the rain, the ground becomes firmer. This saying would give some solace to a defeated country. B-29 pilot Charles Phillips would stay in the Air Force and fly modern bombers. Others who serve in the B-29 squadrons would return home with unforgettable images of battle. American air power plays a decisive role in achieving the final victory in World War II. The ruined cities of Japan are grim witness to the effect of thousands of planes carrying hundreds of thousands of bombs. Yet it is 2 planes carrying 2 bombs that would change the future of warfare forever and the course of human history. February 19th, 1945. American forces land on the shores of Iwo Jima. What starts as a plan to take the island in a matter of days becomes a protracted battle with entrenched Japanese infantrymen willing to fight to the death. For each square foot, Iwo Jima will become one of the bloodiest battlegrounds of World War II. Howard Baxter was with the 5th Marine Division. It was here that he would live through hell on earth, on the battlefront. By late 1944, American forces have been taking back islands of the Pacific from the Japanese. Only 600 miles south of Tokyo lies the tiny island of Iwo Jima, a volcanic speck in the ocean. On December 8, 1944, American B-24s call on the island. The Japanese have been using Iwo Jima to stage raids on American B-29 bases in the Marianas. Admiral Nimitz makes it a top priority. Neutralize Iwo Jima and take it in February. For 74 days, American bombers hammer the island. February 12, 1945, an armada of 485 American ships are about to begin the invasion of Iwo Jima. The strike force is to join Admiral Raymond Spruance's Fifth Fleet. It is the most powerful naval force in history that is assembled under one flag. The invasion is set to commence on February 19th. 3 Marine divisions make up the assault force. The 4th and 5th divisions are to go in first and blaze the trail. Aboard the ships are 75,000 assault Marines. Among them is graphic artist Howard Baxter, who is trained as a parachutist.
I was still a private first class, and when they dissolved the Paramarines and the Marine Raiders, they dissolved them, and we formed the basic corps of the 5th Marine Division, most of us. I was in infantry. I was a Browning automatic rifleman, what they referred to as a BAR man. We never knew we were going to hit Iwo Jima until we were aboard ship a couple of weeks. And then they brought out these clay model maps that would show a miniature version of the island. And that's when they then told us what we'd be hitting and how well they were dug in, all the tunnel caves and everything that were there. We thought about 5 or 7 days was estimated at. We had 3 divisions that they were committing. 2 initially to make the beachhead, and the 3rd in reserve, which amounted to approximately 60,000 men, plus reinforcements. The island at the longest point was 7 miles. The volcano sat at the one end. The narrowest point was half a mile wide.
But Iwo Jima is of strategic importance. It would provide a much-needed emergency landing strip for the crippled American B-29s returning from Japanese bombing raids. Commanding the island's defense is one of the Japanese High Command's toughest officers, Lieutenant General Tadamichi Kurabayashi. In June 1944, he is sent to Iwo with a mission to save the island or die fighting. In the next 3 months, he moves in guns, tanks, and troops, doubles the size of his fighting force, and does his best to render the island impregnable. Men arrive at the rate of 500 a day. By October, 21,000 troops are on the island. The Japanese laborers work under horrendous conditions in sweltering heat to fortify Iwo Jima. Kurabayashi has decided on the best mode of defense for Iwo Jima. There will be none of the typically Japanese bonsai charges, no suicide counterattacks at the beachheads. The commander has ordered his troops to mount a static defense with everybody dug in. He divides the island into separate defensive sectors, then rings each one with guns, mortars, landmines, and bunkers 5 feet thick. Underground, the island is a honeycomb of rock and cement. 5 levels of tunnels, most of them 30 feet below ground, connect the entire complex. When the attack comes, any advance will be made over dead Japanese bodies. American commanders are aware that such a huge fleet movement will not be a secret. Japanese spotter planes and submarines track it every nautical mile. Kurabayashi is alerted to the approaching invasion. Japanese intelligence estimates it will start between February 15th to the end of the month. The Japanese are braced to fight to the very end. Every soldier knows the importance of holding off the Americans. It's 6 a.m. on February 16th, and American bombing runs continue.
Made us feel really good to have those battery opening up there and blowing things to smithereens. We also saw what the battleships and the cruisers were doing to the volcano there. They were knocking out whole hunks of it into landslides. We thought they were doing a real terrific job.
Finally, the day of the invasion, February 19th, 1945. American intelligence estimates the Marines will be facing over 22,000 soldiers.
You actually try to numb your feelings. I know I did. You just don't know what's going to happen. You know that this can be a rough one. You know, you're out quite a ways, and slowly you're getting closer and closer and closer, and the roar of the motor of the Higgins boats and the landing craft, the spray and the salt spray. So the surf gets kind of rough, and all of that water swirling around from all the other boats in the water. You have to get used to being there. You have to get your physical and psychological machinery going to where you have to do what you have to do. Everything in you wants to run, wants to get out of there, but you can't do that. They put you there, and you got to fight your way out. That's what you have to do.
From their bunkers, the Japanese monitor the approaching force. The final signal is given. After 74 days of constant bombardment, the Marines expect a shattered island with a demoralized defense. The troops who land are betting their lives that the bombing worked.
The first wave hit at 8 o'clock. The first 3 waves didn't catch much fire because the enemy was still hunkered down in their pillboxes and the caves and tunnels because naval gunfire was keeping them down. But they had to lift that naval gunfire and aerial protection, the bombing and striking, because when we get friendly forces, then you don't want to hit your own forces with a covering fire. I landed in the 11th wave, which was 2 hours after the main force. Once we hit the beach, I almost stepped on a landmine when I came off the landing craft. And unfortunately, I saw it in time and stepped around it. And that's when the enemy comes out, mans their guns and cannons, and everything starts opening up. So from about the 4th wave on, it's when all hell broke loose on the beach. Down near the base of the volcano, up till midway, was that black sulfuric sand. You would sink about halfway up to your knees, and then that stuck. That's why you couldn't move around too fast. Just had to slog through it. You know? In fact, you couldn't sit in your foxhole too long at a time because the sulfur would heat your buttocks up too fast. It was mainly machine gun fire following us all through mortar fire, artillery fire, running and burying your nose and face into that black sulfuric sand.
Marines find out that Japanese defenses have not been diminished by 3 months of bombing. Although the Marines outnumber the Japanese on Iwo Jima, they are pinned down by the enemy's gunfire.
An attacking force has to be larger than the defending force. You're going to lose more men in attacking than you will defending. Not only do you advance over the enemy's bodies, you advance over your own men's bodies. That's the only way you can do it. They were a smaller force, but they were really dug in. The tunneling and the caves gave them the protection. And with all of that bombardment, they were dug deep. Every inch of that land had to be fought for. We had 20 landing craft off of our troop ship. Only one of them ever came back. All the rest were destroyed on the beach from artillery and mortar fire. I can remember lying on the beach and looking back over my shoulder and seeing an LC I had blown to bits from the artillery.
Under fire, the Marines are unable to achieve their objective of taking the volcanic cone of Iwo Jima, Mount Suribachi.
Our first night was spent alongside the airfield that they had, and the artillery fire that came in on us was just something else. You sleep out of the exhaustion, but even then your sleep is broken because when you got night infiltration, artillery fire, mortar fire, or the enemy decides to attack, your sleep is disturbed. And then it's hard to get back. You get keyed up, and it's hard to get back to sleep.
Finally, the Marines call for help.